Welcome back to Conversations from the Hearth. Today I'm joined by a very special guest. This is Sensei Ramsey Veitch. Been out here at Impulse Martial Arts, teaching a seminar, working with great students, fantastic martial arts ability out here. They have a great instructor, and we thought that it would be great to sit down and talk about, what techniques are the most important techniques for people to learn if they're just trying to get to a high level of defense readiness in the shortest period of time. That might not mean that they are the best techniques, because the best techniques might take a long time to develop, but what are some of these essential techniques that everyone should learn? Before we talk about this topic though, let me just introduce Sensei Ramsey Veitch just a little bit. He's a lifelong martial artist, decades of experience, started in Aikido. He's branched out into several other disciplines, and it's a big honor to have him on the show. Anything else you want to add about your background that I'm kind of glazing over here? I know you.
Yeah, of course. So my background is mainly Japanese martial arts. So Aikido was what drove me into a career in the martial arts. Watching Steven Seagal and all these other childhood heroes like Jackie Chan and Jean-Claude Van Damme, etc. Bruce Lee, Brandon Lee. So I'd get into the martial arts, and I found a school that did Aikido, but we also did Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, grappling, Judo, samurai sword, kabuto weapons, Aiki-Jitsu, Kempo karate, a whole bunch of stuff, and got a good overview of the martial arts world that way, thankfully. And then I branched out into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Kali and all this other stuff as a result of understanding all that. I was able to kind of branch out and understand that a little better as well. I've also gotten into a lot of very straightforward firearms and knife defense and offense to supplement my training. And it's interesting because I was never really into guns growing up, but except for video games or playing with my friends or whatever. And then I got into firearms when I was a little more introduced to a friend of mine, Kenny Bigby, and he was teaching me these firearms tactics, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. And since then, I've just went full bore, just went into it all in into a system called Tricom, and it really opens the world of weapons use and defense, and brings it to the reality of it out to prove to everybody that it's not something simple to understand and comprehend, especially without martial arts experience. I don't know if that makes it work easier or harder, but there's a lot that goes into it. So that's learning those tactics and working with law enforcement and military professionals to learn this stuff and to get certified in training is what has really been a really interesting and intriguing, challenging path for me. It really makes me feel a little more complete as a martial artist and a self-defense practitioner. So I want to display all that information and get that information out to anybody who needs it, whether it's law enforcement or military or especially civilians, because there's so many people out there that have this concept from movies or media or television or whatever it is, that weapons are a certain thing, self-defense is a certain thing, and it's just not. So we have to separate martial arts from self-defense, from fighting like MMA, boxing, sports-oriented competition. And once we do that, we get a firm understanding of each and where they lie in the martial arts world as a whole. Just like with Master Olds bringing everything together with one way, that's kind of the idea. We have to also separate them and so that we all know which ones do what for who, so that we can better the world of martial arts, so we can all come to a good understanding and not be egotistical, and most importantly, not be misled or misinformed as to what's going to work, because that's very debatable. So
Yeah, so it sounds like you have a really interesting background here, with your TRICOM training, which is all about like extreme force and guns and knives and that kind of thing. And then Aikido, which is all about like minimal force. So you have a really robust range there that you can talk about this topic today, which is what are the essential skills that people need to know to get to the highest level of proficiency to defend themselves the fastest? What do you think?
So I have developed my own acronym. There's acronyms everywhere, and I think there's like the RAT system, and I don't know, a whole bunch of other ones. But my acronym is basically PET, and it stands for Prevention, Escape, and Tactics. It's kind of your blueprint for what the priorities are. And self-defense, as we need to see it, is potentially life and death. And you want to view self-defense as life and death. And the reason I say that is because it's not the kid at school bullying you and you have to return the favor by killing them or anything like that. It's not always kill or be killed. But you want to view every instance of harm or threat of harm as possibly your life or your quality of life going way down because of your severe disability now as a result of injury or mental trauma, whatever happens after an event. So understanding it in that light, we should be focusing on prevention first and foremost. And that comes along with awareness and educating yourself, educating your mind, practicing what to look out for, signs, pre-attack indicators. We're talking about things to do and not to do. It's like locking the doors on your house in the middle of the day. Some people say, oh, I don't lock my doors in the house. That's fine. And it's all good until somebody just opens your door and enters in the house. And although that's going to be a rare occurrence, you're not taking proper measures to prevent that from happening, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. We want to be vigilant in preventing things as much as possible, and if you are a little more hyper vigilant without being paranoid, because there's a fine line between the two, you're going to really, realistically, you're going to minimize the opportunity for anybody to actually assault you or to do bad things to you. So prevention being number one is exactly why it's in the front of my acronym. And if you can do that, you can learn all the martial arts in the world. You're not going to use them, right? And we have a saying in the martial arts that if the point of learning martial arts is so you don't have to use them. And because you become humble and you know what you're capable of, you know what other people are capable of, and you know what vulnerabilities you have as humans, right? We all bleed. So
well, yeah, there's a sort of soft confidence that comes from knowing how to defend yourself, and I think it's a lot of people who have a small ego that end up acting like they have a big ego because they're deep down inside kind of insecure.
Yeah, I agree, and so prevention is something that we have to just educate ourselves on. There's books, there's real stories you can read, on Reddit or online anywhere. Real journal entries and stuff where people talk about like this is what happened to me, and oftentimes you're gonna read it and you might be like, well, I didn't think somebody would do that, And while there's common things, because common things are common, right? You can train all day, and then whatever happens out in the street is going to be something you've never experienced before. It's going to be a different angle, it's going to be a different speed, different lighting, footing. You're going to be in a different situation. And I'm reiterating what other people have said before because I learn, so I'm not creating what I'm about to say. But basically, crime, violence, self-defense opportunities, they don't care who you are, what you're doing, where you're at, whether you just got done with leg day, if you're holding a baby, if you're carrying groceries. They don't care if it's light or dark out. They don't care if you're sleeping. These self-defense scenarios happen when they want to happen. So you are always at a disadvantage because you don't know they're going to happen. And that kind of leads to the next one. And the next one is escape. So we have prevention and then escape. Escape is essentially where we identify that prevention didn't work. We're walking and now we perceive somebody who's potentially a threat. And now we have to leave it up to ourselves to identify that appropriately and escape the situation. For example, you're walking down the street by yourself, somebody's walking towards you, and you don't think that that person has good intentions for whatever reason. But the way they're dressed, the way they walk, the way they talk, their mannerisms, whatever it is. You should cross the street, just plain and simple, right? I don't care what they look like and all that stuff. What matters is if you don't feel safe for whatever reasons and you don't cross the street, don't blame anybody else that you got attacked. If you didn't perceive them as a threat and they attacked you, now it is what it is, right? But you just didn't. That just means that we didn't take enough, get enough education to kind of work on learning how to perceive threats. And sometimes you can't perceive them. You're not going to be able to win every prevention battle, but you're going to learn through experience, through reading other people's experiences and identifying these vulnerabilities we have in the world that we can learn from, so we can pull from that and then learn how to identify these threats and then escape the situation before physical contact ever happens.
Just on this topic of awareness, I think I've met a lot of people that are woefully unaware of the hostility that's around them. And I always encounter too, when people start doing martial arts, they start becoming like hyper aware of all the things. They say, okay, well, it almost becomes sort of paranoid because they're like, well, I'm going to this restaurant, I got to sit so I'm facing the door, where are the exits, where are the threats?
All the time.
I'm looking at people as they come in, I'm looking at their faces to determine their aggression level. As men, I think this is more common. I think there's a lot of kind of jockeying that happens as you're growing up and physical intimidation that's occurring. So men seem to be more clued in on this. And I mean, no disrespect, but I think my experience has been like the vast majority of women that I know growing up that didn't do martial arts were like totally unaware. They were like totally unaware. I would be like, that guy, I almost got in a fight with that guy. And they were like, really? Like they have no idea. It's like, yeah, because the aggression level was like so high and it was getting really intense. So I think, like you're saying, one of the first things you need to know is to be aware and to not just be like eyes open, wide angle vision, taking in what's going around you, head up, but also like perceptively aware, like what is their intention?
100%. And if we can't escape, then that leads us into our last letter. Our last letter is T for tactics. You can say techniques. You can go into a couple other things, but your tactics are anything that facilitate your ability to escape. And we're going to start working backwards. And tactics is where this conversation is actually headed, right? What do we teach somebody to do in order to facilitate the ability to escape? If I grab on to somebody, they can't escape. They have to do something in order to escape because I have control of them. If I'm locked in an elevator with you, you can't escape. There's no escape. You have to do things tactically to escape, right? And then once you escape, your goal is to escape to get to a safe space, whether that's behind somebody, in a car, behind your own door, police station, whatever it is. Until you feel safe, you have not finished escaping. So that means you're running and running and running, and you're looking for a place to hide or for protection. And once you do that, then we go back into prevention mode, and then everything is reset. But the tactics, that's really what we're talking about, right? But I had to lead in with that because if I don't, then everybody thinks that, oh, well, I'm just gonna have to I just have to punch my way out of it, right? And that's exactly the last thing that I teach people to do. Because although I don't teach, and I can't teach everybody prevention, I just tell them, look, if you want to avoid physical altercation, learn the psychology of somebody who's aggressive, drug addicts, people on the street, pre-attack indicators, stuff like that. Look for these kinds of things, and you'll never have to use physical skills ever. Now, with years of experience, we kind of, we read books and we understand these kinds of things a little more than the average person who's just learning self-defense. However, it's something that everybody can learn. So the escape portion is obviously just leaving. You can walk across the street like in my example, or you can leave by running away. Whatever it is, you're escaping the situation. I have a blog that tells all about the PET acronym and on my website, and you can read it. And I actually use an acronym for fire, or not an acronym, a metaphor of fire. And basically, every day we go home and we prevent fire. We make sure the stove's not on, we make sure nothing's up against the radiator, we make sure that the candles aren't lit when we leave. We prevent, we don't even think about it, right? So we're preventing a fire. But then a little fire happens, something gets caught on fire, boom, we have the choice. One is escape. You just leave the house, call the fire department, they come, they extinguish, they do their thing, right? You can do that. However, if the fire is small enough, you can choose to use your tactics, or if you can't get out of the fire, you can use tactics to try to extinguish the fire your own, or to subdue it enough for you to get to safety, such as fire extinguisher, water, baking soda on a grease fire, whatever it is, right? And those are the tactics to put out the fire or to mitigate damage while you're handling the fire in order to escape. That's kind of why we're doing this the way we're doing it. And our tactics are going to dictate quickly whether or not we're able to escape. And it's going to be a little easier than some people think.
Just to rewind for just a second, like this idea of, you could say running away from violence or conflict, but I think another word is like avoiding unnecessary violence and conflict. We always want to be careful that we don't make ourselves look like a bigger target by looking meek, like putting your head down and like kind of like, shying away from something. Sometimes like standing your ground can actually be an effective way to resolve things, but it could also be like, deflecting with humor. Somebody says something mean to you and you say something like very polite and nice back, or kind of witty and chill. That can really cool things down. There's a whole, sort of aspect of the martial arts that I feel like I wish was developed more, and I know some people are kind of working on that in different areas in our community, but like verbal judo, with the way to socially de-escalate things, I think is important. I think also, just cutting across the street and to avoid the bar fight that's going on over there, or the aggression that you're seeing manifest, is also important. But let's get to the tactics.
Yeah,
let's get to the tactics a little bit.
Absolutely. So this is my favorite part, but obviously not the most important part, but it's the best part. And I always tell people I'm going to teach you how to run away today, and I tell them I literally teach them how to run away today. The biggest problem with self-defense, especially versus martial arts and even sport fighting, right? Whether it's sport grappling, MMA, whatever. There's the threat of permanent injury or bodily harm, right? Typical definition of assault and battery, right? And this is what's not apparent in regular martial arts training, in MMA or competition fighting. There's safety, there's rules, there's judges, there's people around, and it's not just you and somebody else locked in your house all by yourselves. There's no rules, there's no dictating, you can't do that, or I can't do this, right? Somebody's attacking me in my home, to be kind of forward with this. If a knife is my only option, then I might have to do what I have to do. Here's a great example. If you're falling backwards on your bed as you're being attacked in the middle of the night, grabbing somebody in the groin and crushing their balls is an amazing strategy, or digging your fingers into the eyes. But if I'm going up against a great martial artist and I just come at him with my hands like this is a terrible idea. He's gonna hit me, like he's front kick me, something, before I can even get in range to do that. So
self-defense and, like live training, even in the, I would say maybe most applicable disciplines, are very different things. And that's why it is a balance between live training and self-defense training, because self-defense training can, if it's truly self-defense, can never be fully manifested on the mats because it's just way too dangerous. No one wants to actually work on snatching the balls and digging into the eyes.
You can't prove it works that well, yeah.
Yeah, but you need to develop that timing and distancing, which you get from actually sparring with each other. So, anyway, just to prove that point a little bit further.
Absolutely.
If you're falling backwards on your bed, you're not going to be able to do much else, but that's a great technique, when they've already cleared that distance.
For sure. Yeah, and so the idea of stress comes into play, and the stress of losing your life or being severely injured without a safety net is what people don't quite understand. That's why self-defense is its own category, because you could spar all day, right? Me and Master Olds could spar all day, but we know we're both going to walk out of here relatively unscathed, right? Maybe a broken nose, maybe a hurt leg or something, you know what I mean? But in the end of the day, we're gonna be friends, and there's not gonna be any issues, right? So that's gonna dictate how we operate during our sparring session. And if we always do that, it's not going to dictate necessarily how we're gonna operate under the guise or the stress of a real self-defense scenario.
Sparring is like a skirmish or a tactical strike, or a lot of modern warfare that you see where it's like, clearly one side has a complete advantage, but they are going in and trying to do like isolated strikes and make sure that there's not a lot of excessive casualties. A war where, we're dropping the nuclear bombs and we're going with everything we possibly have, that is kind of the difference between sparring on the mats and self-defense. Like self-defense is like pulling out all the stops and it is game on, and that is a very different environment. One of the things, I don't want to get us too far away from the tactics because I do want to get there, but I think 3 things are really important for self-defense. They're also really important just to be a great martial artist. You need obviously technical ability, but you also need a ferocious mindset, and you also need physical fitness. These 3 things are almost in equal proportion. So I think a lot of people think technical ability trumps these other areas. It does not. I know a lot of people that are technically very able that would get thrown, just completely annihilated by somebody who has no technical ability, but they're super savage minded and they're in great physical shape. Like those things are really, really important. So all of these things that we're talking about today, they are not gonna save you unless you're also committed to developing your mental ferocity and your physical fitness. Those things have to all be interconnected.
And training stress during your tactics is the more important thing. We're gonna talk about open palm strike. We're gonna talk about a quick headbutt. We're gonna talk about all that stuff. But you have to start training that a little under stress. And you can do that in a variety of ways. But the point is, if you have no stress inoculation and you're not operating under stress during self-defense training alone, this is like assuming we're just learning self-defense. Like the stress of a sparring match, the stress of rolling around, in a grappling match. Like that's stress, right? But there's still not enough stress of, I'm going to get killed, right? So we have to just remind ourselves and tell ourselves, if I'm not successful with this, I could really bite the dust here. So I have to be careful with this. And so moving on to tactics, one of the first things that I teach personally is open palm strike, right towards the face. Okay. And there's a couple ways we can do it. The first one is just straight in. The other one is more a little curved. It's almost like a hook, if you will. But it's like this or like this. And this one has the ability to bring your shoulder up to block in case they're kind of getting to your head. But this one, goes straight in. It's nice and fast. So that's number one, is open palm strike. You're less likely to break your hand, jam a finger, stuff like that. But it comes with its cons as well. But for the most part, you're gonna you're gonna hit with the palm heel and go right for the face somewhere. Secondly, front kick is really good for getting people away, getting them distance. However, I usually don't teach that right away, but it is very, very useful when somebody's just running at you and you have nowhere to go. Such as you're in an elevator and you need to keep distance from somebody with a knife, boom, like there you go. That's a great example.
Honestly, if I could teach one technique to a beginner, it would be a jab side kick. I know that sounds ridiculous. A jab side kick is kind of an advanced technique, so I wouldn't teach it to a beginner as a way to get them to a high level of proficiency. But the reason why that kick is so good is because people tend to just charge you recklessly, and you need some technique that's just gonna stop them in their tracks. Front kick is a lot easier technique for people to learn, and so that is actually a great starting point. And a lot of people think that, oh, well, they'll just grab my leg. They're not thinking about grabbing your leg. They're thinking about punching you in the face. So they're amped up too, and so they're going to be running in, and their whole body's going to be open. That's actually what happened to me when I got mugged back in college. Is these guys just ran in, totally recklessly, big swinging haymakers, and that was the target that presented itself every time. And none of them grabbed my leg. They just got blasted like 15 feet. So.
And you knew how to kick at this time, right?
You're
a pretty established kicker, yeah.
Yes, and so I was able to just basically knock them so far away that they had to run back in again, they get hit again. And every time they had the same approach. Now, if things had continued, they probably would have started to wise up, and then they would have been like kind of like waiting for me and then try to grab my leg. But at that point, then I punch them in the face. You change your strategy too when they change their strategy. But the first strategy that people are gonna have is like, attack, and it's gonna be very simple and very basic. Unless you're going up against someone who's a really well-trained martial artist, but then, you're not going to be able to defend yourself with a few months of training with these very basic, simple techniques. You're going to have to actually get to their level of ability or have a weapon, which is obviously going to change things completely.
Right. Yeah, we call those equalizers, right? Or force multipliers. So if you use a weapon, we'll get into weapons a little bit later. But yeah, so we like I said, we want to use tactics to facilitate escape. So we do a quick strike towards the face, and that's very specific for a reason. Or we can do a quick kick to kind of get them away. Like I said, you're stuck in an elevator, you're gonna get mugged or raped or whatever, and you need to get distance. A kick is really powerful as long as you learn it correctly and practice it correctly. So aside from that, you can definitely learn elbows. Elbows are very close quarters, very detrimental to somebody's face. But it has to be done in a certain way. But elbows are usually the next step after the straight and the kick. It's usually, for me, next step is elbow, and then after that we kind of go into grabs. You want to add something?
Yeah. Well, what I would just say is, not all schools teach board breaking, and a lot of, sometimes you get a bad rep, like a board is not going to attack back. But here's the thing: board breaking is great because it builds confidence. It teaches precision. It helps you to work on your power generation. But one of the things that no one ever talks about board breaking that is absolute genius is when you try to punch something really hard, you learn very quickly what techniques are maximal effect with minimal damage to yourself. So like a palm strike is one of the first things you learn when you're learning board breaking, because it's super simple and very hard to hurt yourself. And the board breaking shows you, that's the technique you should be doing, not some complicated, punching is great. Punching's got more penetrative power. It's a smaller surface area, so it is a better technique. But it's actually not a good beginner technique, especially when you're punching somebody in the face. It's very easy to break your hand. The reason why old-time boxers who do bare-knuckle boxing, I know this because my grandfather was a bare-knuckle boxing champion, the reason why their guard was down like this is because they were protecting their body. And it's because they were punching each other in the body. Now, they could punch each other in the face, but a couple punches in the face, you could break your hand. The head is really hard. So that's why when you're striking the head, a palm strike is actually safer for you. If you're punching the body, if you're hitting the body, I wouldn't do a palm strike. I would do a punch because it's more penetrative. So things like that. Some other techniques that I really like: elbows, knees, hammer fist. Hammer fist is great. You don't use hammer fist standing like this. Use hammer fist once you take them down. So maybe you hit them with a palm strike in the face a couple times and they're falling backwards. You get up on top of them, get knee on belly, and then you're bam, 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 raining down your hammer fist on their vulnerable parts. It is a great downward force technique, but it's not good for forward, and I think that's why a lot of people dismiss it, but it is a fantastic technique. You see it all the time in MMA. People get in these weird positions and they're like trying to hit somebody and they're doing something weird. People think, what the heck is he doing? He's doing a hammer fist. And that's why you have to develop your hammer fist. It's a very useful technique.
Moving on, I would say grabs is probably the next realistic thing, right?
Sure.
So I was talking about, I was already talking about running away before, and just to kind of show you what we're doing with tactics. If you're approached and you're in a position where you have to escape, but they've already made physical contact with you, or they start attacking you, or they reach for you, or whatever, or they do grab you, whether it's by the collar, by the head, whatever, your goal is to use one good tactic, right? Or multiple, depending on how many you need. You do as many as necessary. And the moment that you're able to get away, you should be running away, right? And for right now, we're just talking about self-defense, right? But there's also something called a protector role, where you cannot leave the situation. I am with Master Olds, but he's actually really old and decrepit, and he can't do his back spinning kick anymore, right? And he can't knock people out with his back spinning kick anymore. I can't just run away from him, right? I can't run away from my child. I can't leave my family there to get mugged and killed or raped or kidnapped, whatever it is, right? I can't do that. So for me, it would be my responsibility to make sure that these people were handled efficiently enough to give them time to escape, right? So the protector role kind of facilitates escape for the other people. Let's say, for example, somebody's actively choking Master Olds, right? My goal is not to escape the situation. My goal is to help him escape the situation, right? Put your mask on first and then, help them, right? In this instance, I'm helping him first. So I'm gonna handle the other attacker and then, boom, now I'm gonna escape the situation, right? The protector role is usually more active in offending somebody as opposed to defending from somebody because you have to typically engage voluntarily in order to neutralize them.
On that note, I think grappling is really important, especially a lot of the standing grappling things, because you're going to be pulling somebody off somebody else, and knowing how to control those limbs and get them into more of a package position where they can't really attack anymore is going to be really critical. Yes, you can blindside them with strikes too, but it's all going to be happening really fast, and as you're coming in, they're going to be turning around, and you need to kind of get a hold of them and control them. I think, this is kind of going in a different direction, but striking and grappling are both very necessary. Striking is the only choice you have when you have multiple opponents. Like, you can't grapple two people at the same time. You're going to get curb stomped while you're trying to roll around with this guy. So you have to know striking. And you can take out a lot of people if you are efficient and you are using your persona, your kind of intimidation to scare people off while you're taking them out as you're moving forward.
Be a force.
That's what happened with this mugging situation, is that I was so aggressive and scary that they started to retreat. And so I think that can only really happen with striking. With grappling, if I had tried to take one down, the other two would have come on top of me, and it would have been a really bad situation. Now, grappling is really good because grappling is so unintuitive that once you take someone to the ground, they have no idea what they're supposed to do. They tend to do the opposite thing that they're supposed to do, and they don't know how to get out of it. And they thrash around, they use up all their energy. When you're grappling, you want to conserve your energy, because once you run out of energy, you're going to lose. Whereas like with striking, you can run out of energy and just kind of put your guard up and catch your breath slowly and then get back in there. Grappling is not like that. If you have to catch your breath and you're running out and you can't find that surge of energy, you're going to get tapped out. So these two skills are really important for full spectrum self-defense, but they come into play differently. I would say grappling's great for one-on-one. Grappling's great for bodyguard situations where you're trying to defend somebody. I think striking's really good for multiple opponents. And of course, you can strike and grapple at the same time. Like, It could start as a grapple as you're taking them down, and then it can turn into some strikes, and then you could finish with some kind of submission. Going on to the grappling side, I think everyone should know a couple of submissions. I know a lot of beginners that know just a couple submissions, they know how to do them well, and nothing else, and they can consistently submit a newbie. They just know how to do an armbar and a rear naked choke. Those two techniques, I think everyone should know how to do. There's a lot of other more challenging submissions that come into play in niche areas, and there may be some better submissions than those two. But those two are very easy to learn how to do, and they have a very high chance of getting a tap out. And a choke, you might even get the person to go to sleep, which would give you the chance to put them in cuffs or do something else. So I think armbar, rear naked choke, absolutely essential. I would say knowing how to get out of a bad situation and get back to your feet is going to be the next most important thing, and how to stay on your feet so you don't go down. So like sprawling, really important. And then we have this position called stand up and base, like technical lift, and that position actually is the best when someone's on top of you. You just kick them back with your foot and you knock them clean off you, and then you stand up real quick and you get back to your feet. That technique, absolutely essential, I think.
Yeah.
What are some of the thoughts?
Sorry. So no, I agree. Those are really good ones to do. The thing is, when you guys are learning techniques that are going to work, right? You could look at sports grappling and or sports competition in general. I mean, if you think about it, boxing only has a handful of strikes, right? But they're really, really, really good at those strikes. That's why these boxers are so devastating, right? Grapplers, if you look at the statistics of grappling, there's only a handful of techniques that hit most of the time. Just like in judo, very aggressive. There's high percentage techniques, and then there's a plethora of techniques later on, or that are, later on in curriculums and stuff like that they you don't see them as often, and they're very, very rare in the actual effect of things.
Yeah. But I think, this is going off a tangent, but I think a lot of people say, well, what's the most effective techniques? Those are the only ones that matter. The thing is that's not how fighting actually works. It's like, if we play chess, there are certain main strategies that everyone has to know how to do. But if all I do is the main strategy that everyone does, I'm not a good chess player, right? It's like, you start with the opening pawn. I don't know how to play chess, but there's like some opening moves that you're supposed to do. If you just always do that and that's all you know, you're so predictable, and everyone's going to take you apart as an experienced practitioner. So where all these other skills come in is, as you start developing your skill, you need all those little niche techniques to create variety and confuse your opponent and get those opportunities to attack. But they're not the first thing you should learn how to do potentially.
Right. And so I mean, I believe like self-defense is usually very concept-based. Techniques, like for experienced martial artists, people who've been doing it anywhere from a year to 10, 15 years, they can definitely put their skills to use in a self-defense scenario a lot easier than a new person would. However, the less you know, the less you should know, because you can't accumulate. We know as martial artists, you can't accumulate a lot of techniques very fast. You can get them, but you're not going to understand them and be able to deploy them. And I think that's what you were kind of touching on, right? We want to be able to manipulate the kazushi, the off balancing of the person. We want to be able to think, let them think we're doing one thing and then trick them into another thing, right? We can do that from standing with feints and all this stuff, right? And once we have the ability to get away, boom, we run away and we do whatever we need to do with that. So tactically, if you are going to engage with somebody, I think one of the good techniques to really learn is a double leg takedown, right? Or even a single leg takedown, because especially if you have to engage to protect somebody else or to stall them while people are getting away, or to engage because you have no other option, double leg takedown can be very beneficial. And if the other person, and I'm just going to kind of preface with this real quick, chances of us getting into a fight with a high-level practitioner, if we don't prevent properly, is really, really, really low. I mean, considering how many people actually know martial arts in the world. So the people that are more likely to engage in you aren't going to be, your McGregors and your Lesnars, and your Anderson Silvas. They're not going to be those kinds of people, right? They're going to be a little more wild, like the people who jumped you right back in college. So, but doesn't mean you're not going to get put up against somebody like he had mentioned before, who's going to be hyper aggressive. Maybe they went to jail and they're just brutal, right? Never an ounce of training in their life. They've just been through so much, traumatically or physically, that they know what they're doing, and they do what they do well, and it's their own, we'll call it jail martial arts, right? Just for an example.
I don't like to throw my my morality into this, but I feel like I kind of need to. That is true. Like, the most people that are going to attack you don't know what they're doing. They're going to come in wild, and that was my own experience. But I do think that that's changing. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I don't teach martial arts unless people want to develop themselves as individuals, because the more aggressive, the more you train in martial arts, there's kind of like a feeling that comes up inside, this confidence that makes you want to handle things physically. And so you see a lot of people that don't try to humble themselves and be respectful, that end up kind of giving into that darker desire, and then they use it to like physically intimidate people, like puff out their chest and kind of try to own the room. And the problem that I'm having right now with the modern martial arts community is that you do have a lot of people that are attracted to MMA, that just don't want any of that. And those are people that you really need to be careful of out on the street, because they're the kind of person, before they were like, I'm not gonna put on the funny pajamas and say yes sir and do all that kind of stuff. So they would just not go to a martial arts school. They would just, do street fights. I'm a street fighter. That's kind of, back in the day, that's kind of how people did it. Now those street fighters are actually going into MMA gyms and learning skills, and they're out there now on the street. So the streets are becoming more of a dangerous place where people actually do know how to physically fight. I remember when I was a kid, a lot of the big jack guys I know never did martial arts. Now a lot of the big jack guys I know are doing martial arts. And I think that is creating a different dynamic on the street. So we have to become better practitioners overall. I mean, there's just no way around it. If we're going to be able to defend ourselves. And then also, remember, there's only so much you can do with your hands. I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, the great equalizer, a gun, a knife, things like that. I don't want to undercut my what I have to offer and teach, because I think actually the physical skills are not the most important takeaway from the martial arts. So, you're going to learn something by coming to my school and Sensei Veitch's school that is different from just going to the gun range. And that's really important to take away. So anyway, getting back on topic here, what are some of those final things that people should know how to deal with?
Well, one thing is really important, I think, is two kind of on the same level, is an arm drag and what's known as a Russian tie, right? Different people have different names for it. Basically, where you're on kind of the outside of the arms, the Russian tie, and then the arm drag, where you're on the inside. So somebody's reaching around you, or they're fighting you on the inside. You need to get to the outside. The outside is the best place.
And what is the purpose of that?
To be able to get to the outside. Mm-hmm.
To get
so if I'm on the inside of you, my goal is to drag you this way, so I'm down here, and then once I'm here, you can't control me as easily because all your tools are that way.
Yes,
right.
Sir.
So now you have to turn around. You have to do all this. That gives me a lot of time to actually get away from you and cut distance.
When you guys are standing, and even on the ground, when your opponent is facing you, they are much better able to defend themselves. If you can start to get behind them, you gain great advantage. So one of the things that a lot of people don't realize with grappling is they will turn around. Like, I did high school wrestling, and one of the best positions was to lay on your belly. That's the worst position you can be in. You should be on your back so that your hands and feet are in front of you. And that's not just true on the ground, that's true from standing too. So if you can do an arm drag or a Russian tie and you can get to the side of somebody, you've gained immense control over that person. If you can get behind them, even better, you know? Sometimes when you're behind, you do have to worry about those elbows and stuff, but side actually, like side and a little bit behind is amazing for controlling somebody.
Yeah, I agree. And then aside from that, the fundamentals of groundwork, obviously you can go into how to escape every position, this, that, and the other thing. But I believe the most fundamental thing to learn, if you are only going to learn one thing, and it is super basic guard retention, and that's essentially where you're already on the ground, whatever, you trip, they threw you down, whatever. Your goal is to learn how to effectively keep your feet at the attacker at all times, right? And always keeping your front forward so you can use your tools as he was just saying. Not turning around when you're within range of them, and just having the awareness of where they are. If you can keep your feet in front of you at all times, you can also kick them in their leg, in their face, if they try to reach for you, right? But under no circumstances can you allow them to grab you, manipulate you, get on top of you, because then now it's going to force you to have to learn a lot of other stuff. So if you're in a crunch for time or abilities or whatever, then we don't want them to be able to get on top of us. But if they do, then it's important to learn basic prevention of positioning if they get past your legs. That's going to help keep you from preventing and escaping those positional challenges before they ever get on top of you, actually getting you inside control or north-south or whatever they're going to get you, right? So your goal is to kind of prevent those as they go. So those are the things that I would focus on if you were going to just want to learn martial arts, self-defense, sorry. And moving on from that is just, I think you had alluded to it before, you call it something else. We call it technical stand-up. What do you call it? Where you put your leg back?
Stand up and base.
Stand up and base, okay. So I think it's the same thing because you had showed us.
Yeah.
And so different terminology: technical stand up, tactical stand up, tactical get up. We heard it all, but it's done more or less the same way, and that's to keep you in line with your attacker, constantly blocking, getting good distance while you're actually getting up and elevating yourself, which is a standard across the board in grappling, is elevation and distance. So once you can get distance, the moment you're within, if you can't touch or grab me, then I'm relatively safe. I should be actively creating more distance, because the moment I'm in distance of getting hit or grabbed, that's exactly what's going to happen. Now I have to use blocks, and now I have to counter hit, and I have to do all this. So you only do that if you absolutely have to. So
another good technique, actually, guys, is like egg beater takedown, because like technical stand-up is great, but it also is pretty vulnerable too. You're just sitting there on the ground and somebody's on top of you, and they're going to be raining blows, kicks down on top of you. So it's probably the best thing you can do if you just want to stay there in one position. But I really wouldn't recommend staying there in one position. I would actually try to trip them and get them to fall if they're standing up. That's maybe a little bit more of an advanced technique, so I don't think a lot of self-defense people might teach that first, but I do think that is it's a really simple takedown, and it's really effective. So basically get a hold of their ankle, hook under their knee, put a foot on the hip, and take them down. That's going to help you have a threat while you're on the ground. And if there's no threat when you're on the ground, they can just attack you with impunity. But if there's a threat that they're gonna you're gonna get a hold of them and you're gonna take them down, then they're gonna start getting scared to try that tactic. Mm-hmm. And once they fall down, you can either get on top or you can get back to your feet. But having some way to take them down is gonna make you more of a threat. I think having some way to take somebody down when you're on the ground, having ways to escape when you're on the ground, which is so many positions and it's very complicated, but if I just can tell you one thing to do, always turn to face your opponent, bring your elbows and your knees together, and just try to create like a barrier between you and your opponent. You're gonna be in a really good place. Keep your elbows to your body, keep your knees into your body so that they can't get a hold of these appendages to attack. Put those appendages between you and your opponent. That can manifest in a lot of different ways depending on the position, but if you always just think like that, you're gonna be in a pretty good position. And then as soon as you can, this is genius, I think, and I'm tooting my own horn, but just throw them back with your foot. Throw them back with your foot. It'll create some space, then you can stand up and you can get out of there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you don't mind, we'll move on to weapons. Just
Okay.
briefly, I
Sure.
don't want to get too far into weapons.
Let's start.
But-
Can I start with this
Yeah.
statistic? Most people who get attacked with a weapon don't know they're being attacked by a weapon. It's dark
Until it already happened?
until after it's happened. Actually, they think they're being punched and they end up being stabbed. I think it was like 80. This is some statistic I learned from Krav Maga in the past, but like 80% of people who get attacked with a knife didn't realize that they were being attacked with a knife until after. You know, it's dark out. Look, it's a small object. They don't know what's happening. So that's why when you defend yourself against somebody attacking, you should do it in a way that's like kind of smart to that being a potential threat. So that's another disadvantage of just focusing only on grappling. Grappling is not going to be good against a knife. A knife is kind of like actually a grappling weapon. It's all about being in close. And so if you try to like get a hold of somebody and have a knife, it's gonna be bad. You actually want to try to create space.
Yeah, grappling with a knife or any kind of a knife or a gun mainly is always the absolute last resort. And there's ways to do it. It's just there's no guarantees. There's absolutely no guarantees. There's just things you want to focus on regarding that. But it's always super dangerous for the most skilled individual. And you can literally prove by just throwing a random blade into a grappling match, and you'll see how wild it can be. So you have to train very specific things to even have any sort of advantage over somebody, especially if they know anything about grappling. But yeah, when you're dealing with weapons and always defending a weapon is always super, super tough. You'll see gun disarms, you'll see knife disarms and all this stuff. And I don't want to say anything specific about anybody or any specific techniques or anything like that, but just know that they're very difficult and there's certain things you want to achieve, such as the things we've already went over. If Master Rolls is in front of me and I consider him hostile and I perceive him as a threat and for some reason I can't escape, I have to tie up his ability to use that weapon. I have to eliminate and negate his ability to use that weapon. So I can work on, I say this lightly, I can work on trying to control his weapon arm, all right? Getting that weapon offline, such as getting to the outside, and trying to disable him, whether it's through knocking him out or terminating him altogether. It just depends on how much of a threat he actually is. But that's kind of the basic guidelines there. And this is kind of assuming you have nowhere to run, you're stuck in an elevator again. If you can kind of bring it back to learning this stuff as if you were in the worst case scenario, you're going to understand what's necessary and what's not. And that way you don't kind of try to make things up too much.
I think gun, knife, and club, although club I'm pretty...
Who says club anymore?
I feel pretty confident.
Are you from 1920s Britain? I'm gonna club you, mate.
I feel like club defenses are very doable. But gun and knife defenses, I think they get into the same area that board breaking does, where people kind of misunderstand them. They misunderstand the purpose of them.
They don't
think
respect them.
that this is something that you're going to use as a primary layer of self-defense. No, this is something you use as a last resort. It's something to help you build confidence in that situation so that you have something in your toolbox. And it is something that you might use if you have overwhelming numbers. You know, there's a lot of examples of there were a huge amount of people and one guy with a gun and they all got killed because they all ran away. And then there's other examples of like 3 or 4 people charging that person, getting hold of the weapon and restraining them. Those are both potentialities, and if you just take the mindset that my only option is to run away, then you're gonna be in the camp that just got murdered. So you have to take these with a grain of salt. I do think that they have some applicability, but you just have to understand that a weapon is such a huge advantage. Like there's a reason why we, from the dawn of time, evolved to use weapons. You know, whether it was a spear or a knife or a bow, we don't have claws, we don't have fangs. We're pretty much useless unless we have a weapon in our hands. We can make ourselves more useful by learning these different techniques, but at the end of the day, that's going to be a huge advantage. And I think people don't really understand well, I think people do kind of get it, but just how much of an advantage a gun is. Like, could you imagine like trying to attack someone with a sword? Like if someone has a sword, that's a big advantage. I would not want to just rush in at this guy with a long sword. You know, he could easily hit me before I can get inside. Now imagine the person has like a sword that goes infinitely forward and will kill you with one touch. You know, I mean, it's like, it is a ridiculous advantage, and there's ways that you can mitigate that advantage, but it's going to be very situational for sure.
Yeah, and then of course using weapons is one of your tactics, right? I met a guy who just teaches, like right out of the gate, he teaches his ladies to use a special kind of knife that's legal in the state they are in, and that's totally fine, right? And that's what he kind of focuses on, right in the middle, just, you know, right in the middle, right? With a little bit of Kali type movements, but but essentially, if you're going to use a weapon as an equalizer or force multiplier, obviously I'm not going to go into legalities, right? That's going to be up to you guys to kind of look into, but realistically, you want to do whatever you have to do to make the situation safe again. And just picking up a knife and trying to lunge it into somebody is not ideal. If you've never used a knife and you've never actually tried to learn how to use it properly in any capacity, and you just say, well, I have a pocket knife. Well, I mean, although a monkey could literally just pick up a knife and do a lot of damage with it, same with a sword, and they could pull the trigger, learning how to use it just a little more effectively than the average person, have a little bit of training with proper angles and stuff in situations that you can learn how to get out of to facilitate that escape. And now you're not going to stick around and get arrested for killing them and all that, using minimal force, right? Same thing with a firearm. If we're going to go at it right now and I had a firearm, right, I need to be able to get to that firearm very, very, very quickly and efficiently before he has a chance to keep me from doing that. And again, like the whole mentality that's out there in the community, which I deplore completely, is the whole idea of well, I have a gun, I'll just shoot him. And I'm like, you've never been in a dojo, have you? You've never been in a training facility. You've never been attacked. I mean, there's a 21-foot rule for a reason. And again, going up against a skilled knife fighter is going to be tough, right? And you have the advantage of a long-range weapon. However, you're going to run out of bullets. Knives don't run out of bullets. You're gonna be off. You have a moving target, active moving target. You have the stress, which is what I touched on before. That is way important to remember, because you could very well lose fine motor function, such as pulling a trigger, maybe racking the slide, getting your magazine out and putting a new one in, assuming you even carry a spare magazine, right? And then when the person doesn't drop, because there's what we call a 10-second rule, dead man's 10 seconds, where this is actually proven, you could have 10 solid seconds, which is forever in self-defense and grappling time, 10 solid seconds or more or less of somebody who's fatally shot coming after you continuously. And you think I shot him a couple times, right? And then there's the fact of, before I get too deep into this, is the idea of feedback. You're looking at a target, piece of paper, and boom, you can see the holes go into it. But when you're looking at a person who's moving and it's maybe a little bit dim, or they're in their house, you're not going to see the blood splatter, right? You're not going to know that they're neutralized until they hit the floor. So you have to treat them as a threat until they hit the floor. And you'll see this, and you'll witness this on when police have to put down perps, right? They keep their guard up all the way, and you can tell the guy's dead, but they keep their guard up all the way until they get to that person. They arrest them even though they pretty much know they're dead, because you just have no idea what's going to happen. And so this is the reality of it, and we want to take all of the fluffy stuff out for our reality-based self-defense training as much as we can. We just want to get that mentality, as Master Joel has touched on before, about learning how to become just a little more aggressive and realizing what's at stake, especially if you're with other people.
So, yeah, we just kind of, we probably should bring this to a close because we've talked for a while, and I want to respect our viewers' times, but I think we've shared a lot of great tips and ideas for defending yourself. But I would also just end on this note, and then you can say many final thoughts you have, but violence is a very gray area. And it is from the very beginning of, schoolyard fights all the way up to self-defense on the street. Someone says something kind of mean to you and they push you and they start picking on you and it's getting to be a little too much. Do you pull out your gun and shoot him in the head? That's a little too much, right? So, and even just punching him in the face after he kind of pushed you, that might be a little too much too. People might not see the push, they might see your punch, they might say you're the monster. That kind of stuff happens all the time. And so knowing that, maybe the quickest way to a solution is to go with extreme force, and maybe the most extreme force would be like some kind of gun, is not going to actually be the one key that unlocks every situation. There's going to be a lot of situations that you need a lot of other skills. And while we kind of open this conversation by saying, when you're falling backwards on the bed, grabbing them in the balls and squeezing or jabbing your thumbs into someone's eyes is a great self-defense technique that you don't often see in, sport martial arts. Those more maybe sport martial art techniques, like, restraining somebody with a rear naked choke or whatever it might be, could be actually the perfect thing that you need when your friend is monkeying around with you. He's being a little, uppity and hostile, and you're like, dude, I need to I need to calm this person down. I need to put him in his place, but I don't want to hurt him in a serious, long-lasting way. The reason why I'm saying all this is because it's just so gray. It's so gray, and the longer you're a martial artist, the more you realize how gray it is, and it's a difficult situation to navigate. So you really need to understand all the different levels of force so you can find the appropriate force for the situation. And then I also remind people to be sensitive to that. It is very hard to find the appropriate force to the situation. People will get amped up, they will get hyper aggressive, and they will go too far because at the end of the day, we're just animals. And then the other thing I will say is also remember, we could start out teaching you how to shoot a gun and use a knife, but the thing is, you might not have your gun, you might not have your knife when the moment presents itself, when you're attacked. You could have a tank parked outside your house. If you can't get to your tank, you're not going to be able to use it. So that's why all these unarmed skills are really important, even in a world where our weapons are so advanced that we can kill somebody in a second.
Especially when somebody's coming after you and you have the knife and gun, and now you have to learn weapon retention. So, there's so much that goes into it. You can't just say, oh, well, I know how to use a gun, therefore I'm good. Well, no, you're not, because I can take your gun away.
You just raise the stakes of that
situation.
What I mean?
And now, and then of course, I'll just end with one more thing, because you already touched on use of force, which is awesome. But understand what use of force is, but also remember, when you bring a weapon into the fight, you're bringing a weapon into the fight. And if you're not familiar with it, and you lose it, now you're giving them an opportunity to use a weapon, which now gives them a huge advantage over you, even more so than maybe before. So before you pull that knife out, before you pull that gun out, you have to do it in a way where you can manage it, and train in a way where you can and you have to have backups in case you do lose it, or maybe they have a weapon as well. So now you need to know. So it gets very, very, very complex. This is why in the end, if you're not there to do all that, you don't have to worry about jail, you don't have to worry about death, you don't have to worry about dismemberment, you don't have to worry about anything. Your best bet is to prevent, be aware, escape the situation as often and as soon as possible, whether it's avoiding, a bar full of kids or not, right? And then use only the proper amount of tactics with use of force to facilitate your ability to escape and to get you and whoever you're with to safety. That's kind of what it all comes down to. It could just be a simple punch. It could just be you going not today, and then just walking away, So it comes at many levels, or like I said, you're locked in an elevator, and now you're fighting for your life for like 3 floors. So you just have no idea what it's going to be into. The more training you have, the better your chances of survival. And the more specific your training is, definitely higher chances of survival. So
yeah, any weapon that you have, you should definitely be proficient with that weapon before you try to use it, because it's also like, don't throw a clumsy kick. If all you can do is a clumsy kick, you're creating a vulnerability by throwing a bad kick. If you have a submission and it's a clumsy submission, it's not going to work either. We have kind of a saying also in the martial arts, you don't need a lot of techniques, you just need a few techniques done at a high level of proficiency. So take some of these techniques we were talking about, palm strike, hammer fist, knees, elbows, a couple basic submissions, and sharpen them up to a razor sharp point. That's going to really help you. But if you go out there and you throw like a weak little punch, it's more of a slap to someone's face, they're gonna shrug it off, and it's gonna just make them mad. And the same thing is true. I've heard stories of people like having mace in their bag, they reach in, they pull it out, and they mace themselves in the face because they got turned around backwards because that's the first time they've ever even tried to use it, or they can't get the cap off.
Or there's overspray. I've heard of overspray, and then they get it into their own eyes. Yeah.
So yeah, you definitely, if you do have a weapon, you should learn how to use it. Although the thing is a lot of the people that I know who do have weapons have done, at least some training, and that's good. But, you can always do more. And like, Sensei Veitch has said, it's different going to a gun range and shooting than trying to do that under duress. One of the greatest things about sparring on the mats that has been for me is that it has taught me to be very calm during physical altercations and violence. And that really, I wasn't sure if it was going to be true, but it has been true every single time when I've been physically attacked, like on the street. It does not bother me because of all the physical violence. I mean, that sounds kind of harsh. All the physical live training that I've done on the mats. So it's the closest you can get, is to kind of do that kind of training. So it's very important. Final thoughts?
No, I did all my final thoughts. You touched on it well. I run a program out in Easton, Pennsylvania, and it's called impulse-tactical.com. We go over, we have a beginner and advanced firearms program, and teaches you, and we also have a concealed carry course, teaches you everything from how to get to your weapon. We talk about distancing, we talk about basic tactics to facilitate the ability to actually get to your weapon. We talk about knives, we talk about physical altercations just without the weapon first. But most importantly, how to actually use your weapon in a close quarters combat scenario, or even in an open scenario. Because once you get into areas of population, you can't just be shooting randomly at your attacker, right? So we talk about angles, we talk about appropriateness, we talk about use of force, and we train all this stuff too, as opposed to just talk about it. So lots of cool things. So just, you can check it out. I also have self-defense tips and stuff under my blog that reads all more in depth about prevention, escape, and tactics, the PET acronym. You guys can read all that at your leisure, and if you ever want to come out, just hit me up and we'll get something going for you.
Yeah, we'll leave a link to his website and information in the description. Guys, let's keep training hard. We'll catch you back at the next one. If you enjoyed that podcast, please consider liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel, as well as hitting the notification bell. We offer in-person, group, and private lessons at our facility in Kyle, Texas, as well as virtual lessons anywhere in the world. If you'd like to learn more about our programs, you can find us online at risingphoenixtkd.com.